And get rid of some of that glare. There you go. Hi.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Getting lighter where you are every day, huh?
Yeah. I can. There's Martha. Hi, Martha.
Hi.
Sure, our special guest would have made it.
Had to get my coffee made.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. No, it felt like a swim event. I was like rushing to use the bathroom before I.
Yeah, that's right. Every Tuesday and Thursday is like that for me.
Well, you're very early in the morning out there. Holy cow.
Yeah. Well, just a couple days a week. Well, in theory, I'd be swimming right now. In theory.
Nice shirt, Christopher.
Oh, yeah.
I was wondering if you would pick that up.
I'm quick, baby. Not much gets by me.
Good morning.
Lost and late.
Yay.
Thanks to those of you that helped me out with some new questions and feedback and ideas. I really appreciate that. I was a very small handful of you, so some of you still owe me some of your questions you'd like to ask, but I do appreciate the people that did send some questions over. Let's see, we have a couple more minutes before we'll do Meet Your Lane Mates, but as I mentioned last week, working on a podcast version, and I'm contemplating going down to one morning a week at 5:30, and then having that second interview time would be flexible based on whoever I'm interviewing. So if you have thoughts on that, you can shoot me an email or a PM or whatever. It does seem like we're kind of in this for a longer haul as places are reopening and cases are spiking again. So if you would really, really, really want to be seeing us in the morning twice a week, let me know that too. I'm just really want to do what I can to keep us connected.
Well, we're supposed to be in an opening phase in upstate New York, and I do a senior gym normally at this time, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I'm really hoping to be able to get that open again because it's such a small little thing. I mean, I get maybe 2 or 3 people max. That's a crowd. So we can totally social distance,
Yeah.
you know. And
Yeah.
and they're not going hardcore into cardio or anything. So they come in, they look at the machines. I've got one lady who'll poke her head in the door and say, "Am I too late? Oh, how you doing, doll?" She's like 99.
Wow, that's awesome.
Hopefully they won't be too afraid to go out the door. They're a high risk.
Oh, you don't mess with these people. No. The people who actually make it to the gym, they're bold. You know, one lady's like, "Oh, I'm past the age of concern."
She'll hit you with your cane if you don't social distance, right?
Oh, there are no canes. I'm the only one with a cane that goes in that gym. Now, Blanche is 99. She's one of my daughter's best friends, and she keeps a hula hoop in her apartment. She doesn't use it, but she's got it just in case. You know. You never know when you might need a hula hoop.
All right, we're about 5 after. Let's do Meet Your Lane Mates. I had a few people say maybe a little bit longer would be nice. Would you guys like more time or less time in Meet Your Lane Mates? I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk to Martha, of course. Would you like 8 minutes today and see how it goes? We'll go crazy. We'll do 8 minutes.
Depends on who your lane mates are.
Hey, now.
We'll just do 3. Let's see.
Elaine's with me. She nodded. I saw it.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping the bugs don't go crazy on me here.
Get more coffee.
All right. We'll see you about 22 till. You'll know when it's happening. He'll kick you out of your room. See you in a little bit.
Guest speaker today.
That's okay.
Yeah.
We're back.
Ew. Good morning, Liz. A couple more people joined too while we were meeting our lane mates.
Yay.
Sorry about that. I couldn't get organized this morning.
Well, come on now. I'm gonna start taking attendance. I'm gonna start sending out demerits if you don't come on time.
No.
Good morning, Christian. Right, everyone be regrouping. And all right, Martha, are you ready?
Sure.
Right, tell us a little bit about yourself, Martha.
Oh, well, I grew up in New Hampshire, the third of four kids. My parents were both from Minnesota, and my mom had been a swimmer, not really serious, but a swimmer growing up. And so by the time I turned, my earliest memory is like swimming at a pond with my grandparents. And I think by the time I was 6, I was on our town swim team, was sort of like, because that's what my siblings and I did. And my dad was an assistant coach. He couldn't swim. Like, he wasn't a swimmer, but he just sort of used his, practical skills. My brother always tells how he would teach a flip turn by flipping his wallet around and so there's always something that was in the background of my thing. And, so competitive swimming, I swam through 1 year of college. I didn't love it in college. I think it was more because all of a sudden I wasn't that good compared to other people, and decided that I'd spend my time doing other things, and just sort of stuck with my love of the community and being in the water, and picked up water polo, which was fabulous. I just had so much fun with it. And after college, I did a couple years of, I lived in New York City and sort of kept sane by running in Central Park, but also discovered a little master swim team that I swam with a bit. And one of the guys was swimming around Manhattan, which at the time I thought was insane. And, I was just like, are you kidding me? I also was in college playing water polo with Steve Minatonis, and I would watch him like train all these extra hours for his distance swimming. And he would show up at hockey games in his shorts and t-shirt because he was doing his cold water acclimatization. And I was like, this is crazy. And it's sort of funny to see that all, 35 years later, I've sort of circled into that world in a very sideways way. But yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where's your favorite place to swim?
Definitely the beach right down the street from my house. I live on the North Shore of Massachusetts, north of Boston, and a half a mile from my house is a place called Singing Beach, which isn't huge. It's a half mile long, but it's beautiful, and it's where I really started to do some open water swimming. I just started doing it just for the pleasure of it and sanity. And I was, just completing what had been a highly contentious several year-long divorce. And it was just sort of like, I just needed to find some sanity. And it was just great to get in the water and feel like, oh, this is something I can do. I feel comfortable. I can relax. I feel competent at something, which for me at that time was huge. So yeah, definitely Singing Beach. Yeah.
Wonderful.
which
When
is
did you-
closed right now. It's open for walking for residents only, but
Oh man.
hopefully it'll open for swimming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about marathons? When did you start swimming marathons?
Oh, not till a couple of years ago. I basically started doing the open water swimming and just about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and started doing some short sort of races, like 1 mile things. And through that, met some people. Like one of the first people I met was Raina, who was at a Shark Fest swim in Boston. And she was like, oh, you swim, this time of year. It was like September. Are you a knucklehead? And I was like, what's that? I had never heard of them. And I was just so intrigued with the fact that there was this group of people that swam through the winter. And so it kind of piqued my interest. And as that winter went on, I sort of kept searching for it and finally tracked it down. And a few months later, I was in the locker room at Curly Community Center looking to meet Helen Lynn, who at the time was very active. And Helen didn't show up, or maybe she showed up late, but it was like I remember meeting Elaine and my jaw dropping and going like, oh my gosh, this is the woman whose articles I've been reading in Swimming Magazine and stuff. And it was just, and afterwards this was like in January or February, we went over to a local club and had beers. And I was texting my friend Doug, who'd gotten me cold water swimming. It's like, I found our people. It was just sort of, and through that, I mean, just sort of at the club that day, I remember Franny showing me a map and saying, this is where the Boston Light Swim takes place. And I was like, oh, didn't really think anything of it. And I ended up putting my name in for the Boston Light Swim that year, assuming that I wouldn't get in. It was a lottery, and it was like well beyond anything I'd done. It's an 8-mile swim, and the longest I had done for, a swim was like maybe 1 or 2 miles. I got in. And this was right after I'd had like a 3-week hospitalization, and I was kind of swimming myself back to health. So here I was in April, having had major surgery in December, and it became this goal. It was sort of this, it was this challenge, like, can I swim 8 miles at a time? And, it just drove me in the pool to stay in longer and swim longer distances and get out and, meet more people and do things. And that summer, I actually did not complete the Boston Light Swim. I pulled out halfway with hypothermia, and I was extremely thin. I had lost all this weight with my medical thing, but I also was transitioning from swimming from wetsuit to without. Like, I actually was contemplating swimming the swim with a wetsuit because I knew it was going to be an issue. But it kind of drove me sort of like, all right, what's my next challenge? It was sort of like I had bit off more than I could chew. It was like the cold water acclimatization and the distance. And I was sort of, over the years, I came back 2 years later for Boston Light and had really been working on the acclimatization and the distance, had done a couple swims at the Kingdom Swim that were longer distances, and was able to complete it, which was just amazing. I remember that was a year that Ned Dennison swam it, and I hadn't met Ned before. And we had corresponded by email a little bit at that point. And we sat in the banquet hall the night before, and he was like, Martha, you have unfinished business. And that just drove me too. And that was just sort of like part of the community and just the whole, sort of like, okay, I can do this. And it was interesting, like right when I got to the point where I'd pulled out, the time before. It's like right before there are these stanchions for this bridge, which has since been taken out. And I realized that there's this current there. And I was like, oh my God, I feel a little dizzy here like I did when I pulled myself out because I thought I was hypothermic. But part of it was that it was the current. And it was sort of just the experience of swimming and learning things as you go. I mean, I absolutely should have pulled out and I did the right thing, but it's interesting to sort of learn that there's so many different factors.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about doing the same swim over again that you could be like, oh, or yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. How do you describe that feeling of finishing a marathon swim? I guess, what was the first one that you finished? How about that? We'll start.
Well, the first one maybe was official was before I did that first Boston Light. I did, no, that was too short. It was the following year I did the 10K, so 6 mile Kingdom swim in Vermont and Memphremagog. And that was great because the year before I had done something like the 5 mile swim. I don't know, it was something that was less than official marathon distance. And my kayaker who had been assigned to me was so excited that I was doing well at the beginning. She neglected to give me my feed. And I was so new to marathon swimming. I was like we got to this point and I'm like, wait, this is the 2 mile marker and I haven't had a feed. And she goes, oh yeah, but you were in the lead. So I didn't want to slow you down. Within a mile, I had completely bonked, and the second half of the swim, so this was like my first swim, I was just miserable. And this was like 2 weeks before I did my first Boston Light, and it was just like awful. But, I made it. So the following year, I had a friend of mine from high school who was kayaking for me, and we'd done sports together growing up. And, she was all nervous about doing it right and had read the instructions, and we'd be partway through and she'd be stopping me and goes, what was your favorite band in high school? Like really making sure that I was okay. And so that was great. So because I had someone who was, a really good friend and was worried about me, and it was just incredible to finish. And I think that it's this whole sort of, for me, it's sort of like you've worked really hard and proud of myself for having made it. And just like, I feel like I'm always sort of like, just like, keep going, drive and adjust to what the circumstances are. But like, you get there and finally you can just let down. And for me, it's just sort of like, basking in that for a little while and then eating salty potato chips.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that, adjusting to those kind of mental phases that happen in a marathon swim.
Yeah.
How do you handle those situations?
Yeah, it's something that I've thought a lot about reading. There are some articles a couple years ago about endurance and women doing well in endurance sports. I mean, you look at someone like Sarah Thomas, and there's some women in ultra marathon running who are, doing as well as the men. And there's this equalizing factor at longer endurance distances for women and men, which I find fascinating. But I also find that what the places I go to be able to get through things are places that I've been to through personal experience as a woman. I wouldn't say childbirth, because that just like happens so much, you just have no control over it. But there are things you can control in that. So there is part of that. But like my divorce process was just endless. It was a marathon. There were aspects where I just had to be patient and wait for things to just sort of slow their course. But there were also times when my attorney would be like, I would just be so bullheaded and saying, this isn't fair, this isn't blah, blah, blah. And she'd say, Martha, it is what it is. And for me, it's like, yeah, it is what it is, and you've got to deal with it. And so I think that that's something that, like when I pulled out of the Boston Light, it was like, it is what it is, I've got to pull out. And, at first I was like, oh, I feel badly. I didn't set a good example for my kids because they're all there waiting at the finish. And then I was like, no way. My example for my kids is I care about my life and I'm pulling myself out, that there's this balance there. But, I do think I've done the Cork Distance Week twice now. And, just hearing people's experiences there and, I've never even dared do the torture swim because I'm scared of what's going to get thrown at me. I think if I go back, I'll do it. But the whole idea that you need to be ready for anything is something that, I've learned from life, and then I can also take it from swimming and apply it to life. I mean, I can't think of how many times I've thought about the term, it's the Dover coaster, thinking about this current pandemic situation, that it's just, so in some way you just got to ride with it and do the best you can. So, yeah.
Yeah. What about the pandemic situation? How is it for you? What's the worst part?
For me, the worst part is this was going to be like a huge spring for me. It was going to be sort of taking things to a next level. I feel that I've done the minimum distance of marathons, and I've been slowly adding, I've done 2 15-mile swims. And this year I was going to do SCAR, which if you live in New England, there's the added challenge of having to do the training in the pool because it's just too cold. So for me, psychologically, doing that amount of distance in a pool was huge. I've kind of refused to do it in the past. I signed up the year before and I was I just postponed it because I could not get my head around spending the time. I like doing the distance because I like being outside in nature and things. Mm-hmm. And this year it was nope, I'm going to do it. So there was the challenge of that distance and the multiple days. And part of what really lit a fire under me was I got into the 20 Bridges swim for June 21st. So for me, if I could do SCAR, at least it could be when the pandemic first hit, I was well, I might not be in great shape for SCAR, but instead of blowing my guts out and trying to have a really fast finish, I can use it as a training for Manhattan and that. And slowly everything, as for everyone else, it all just fell apart. And yeah, so that for me was really hard because for me, the Manhattan was this huge stepping stone. As I said, I'd been at Cork Distance Week and been to this Triple Crown dinner twice and seen these people that have done, Manhattan and Catalina and the English Channel and more. And there was something, in the back of my head going I swear to these people, I could probably do this, but terrified. 2-3 years ago, Liz Fry was Martha, sign up for the channel. And I was yeah, okay, Liz, I'll do that. And she gave the name of pilot. And then the next year she's did you sign up? And I'm no, because it's just I just can't get psychologically around it. I feel oh, that would be really cocky for me to sign up for that, So, I did finally sign up for a channel slot last summer. And, my whole idea was I was going to do attempt Manhattan this summer, maybe try Catalina next summer. And then in 2022, I've got a channel date. And this is kind of set that all off. And I, initially I was taking a writing class, like I'm working on writing a memoir. Well, sort of, I keep dropping the ball and not working on it. But I had this 10-week class where we were meeting in Zoom, and it had me psychologically thinking about swimming and thinking about the visions and why do I do it. And so for those, 8 weeks that I was doing that, it was this, all right, I have to write 10 pages a week. I've got to do all this reading, and I've got to really contemplate my swimming. So, if I went for a short, cold swim, I'd be like, all right, I'm bringing this visualization back, for my writing or for my exercising on my little erg bench that I set up, which I used twice and then said, this is bullshit. And so anyway, it's all kind of devolved, and now my writing class is over and I'm kind of searching for purpose. I feel like it's all kind of dissolved. I'm kind of in this, like, all right, how do I reset?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you reset?
Well, I'm hoping that I'll just go out for a swim and it'll kick in. My problem is, like, the last swim I did, I went to this local little pond and it sucked. My last swim sucked. It was like this pond that was like dark and brown. I was thinking about when I've swum in the Charles River, I'm like, I know this is clean, but there's so many leaves on the bottom, and the wind was kicking up, and I just kind of got a little nervous. And so it's just like, that was a bad swim. So I need a good swim to get me. And there's always bad swims, so I'll get out maybe later today. It's supposed to be warm this week. So, yeah.
Can you tell us about the swim that you're the most proud of?
I would say it's that second Boston Light swim. Coming back and doing something that I hadn't finished before, and not viewing that first swim, being able to turn it around and not being like, oh, I'm a failure, I suck, but like a challenge for, just sort of assessing, why didn't I make it and what do I need to do? And, but mostly the swim was just gorgeous. It was the sunny day. I mean, it was so much warmer than when I'd done it the 2 years before. And, I had a great crew, and it was just beautiful. And, when I got to that halfway point, when I pulled out, I just felt like the water opened up. You sort of get past the islands and it opens up. But for me, it was like the swim also opened up and my stroke opened up, and there was someone who was swimming like right next to me, and I was like, oh, I want to beat him or her, and it sort of made me, and I kicked it in on the end and did well. And it was just such a feeling of accomplishment. It's just, yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. So
Wonderful.
and it's just so beautiful there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's on my bucket list for sure.
Yeah.
With the wiping out of events and everything for 2020, have you had a moment of kind of stopping and wondering why, or am I going to continue being a marathon swimmer?
Not really. I mean, I think the question for me is, when am I going to get back into the whole sort of distance thing? And I kind of imagine that as the water warms up, I'll probably, there are places I can find to swim if I'm creative and ask people if I can park in their driveways and, things like that. So, but yeah, so it's more of a matter of patience and time. And I feel like my mentality right now is I'm going back to why I initially started swimming out in the open water a couple, 5-6 years ago, which is just for the beauty of it and the joy of it. And that's what I'm going to try and approach now. Yeah. So.
What advice would you give to an aspiring marathon swimmer?
One thing I think is that I've learned is don't rush. Like, there's lots of time. I mean, I feel like that's kind of what I did with the Boston Light, was trying to take on too much. There's lots of time, and, they're great things. Like, I love the Kingdom Swim, the way that they're sort of events that you can bite off a bit longer distance each year. And, you can do that other places by picking and choosing your events. But I also think that, find your community. I mean, I can't imagine how I would have be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for the community that's in the Boston area, which is so incredible and nurturing and fun and supportive. And I mean, I look over here at Elaine and, I just think about, like, I think of like her advice in terms of like, be safe and think things through and be careful, that you always have to be assessing, how do you feel? And I'm not sure I would have known that if, I didn't have the, a seasoned community around me. So yeah, so definitely find people who, have some experience. Yeah.
Good advice. Who should we have as a future guest on Marathon Swim Stories?
Well, one person who popped into my mind is Liz Fry, because she's an incredible swimmer, but she also, at the time we've spent together at Cork Distance Week, she's really kind of challenged me and, gotten me, pushing a little farther. And she runs a great swim, the Long Island Swim Across the Sound, that I did last summer, which is a fundraiser. So you need to raise a lot of money, but I mean, it was a fantastic 15-mile swim. So she's one person. And another person I spent a lot of time with in Long Island last summer was, I grew up in New Hampshire by Dartmouth College, and I used to always go to all the Dartmouth swim meets. And there was this, and my dad was always a timer at the meets. So like, we always had this interaction. And one of the swimmers that I used to watch and be awed by was Jim Bayless, who is a marathon swimmer from Connecticut. And he, it turns out, was a history major and took a lot of classes from my father. So we've had this great interaction, but he has this like memory of events and like play by play that he can just draw things out. And so he's just a wonderful person. So I think he'd be interesting. But the other person that I just had a wonderful interaction with, who's sort of driven sort of some of my thinking recently, is Marilyn Bell, who is like on Facebook, she's Marilyn Grace. And I, in the small world, her son lives in the next town over. And for a job I was working, I was told I should meet him. And he's like, oh, my mother is. And so anyway, I watched the Zoom celebration of her induction into the Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. And, I don't know Marilyn. It was just, I was asked by her son, and I was like, wow, yes, I'll be part of that. And afterwards, she sent me a message on Facebook saying, thanks you so much for participating, and da-da-da. And we had this correspondence, and we were talking about how are we handling the pandemic. And she just had this beautiful statement about how swimming has guided her through life, that there are ebbs and tides, and how, this is, that she's sort of going with it. And it, I should pull up the thing, but she just had, this wonderful thing of how marathon swimming has guided her through life, and that, that things change and you have to deal with the circumstances. And it was just beautiful. So I think she could be great. Yeah. And very so accomplished. Yeah. Yeah.
Elaine just sent me something. Do you want to speak to that, Elaine? Oh, the International Swimming Hall of Fame.
So it was actually the Swimming Hall of Fame. Not she was already in the marathon.
Oh,
She was
okay.
already in Imshof. This was Eishof. Like this was the big one. It was a really big deal because
Okay.
marathon swimmers are seldom inducted into. You know, you have to really achieve something huge. Like Sarah will probably eventually get into Eishof. You know, Chloe McCardle will probably eventually get into Eishof. But for us mortals, it's really hard to make that leap from the Imshof to Eishof, and so this was a really big deal. And there had been a fair bit of lobbying on Ned's part, I think, to get her into the Eishof and stuff. So yeah, it was really good, and I totally second Martha's suggestion. Marilyn is a lovely human, incredibly articulate, very forthcoming, and I think she would make a fabulous interviewee.
Oh, I might need a push.
Yeah, I can send email me. We'll figure it out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Martha. It was really, really, really fun to talk to you today.
Thank you.
Thursday we have Jamie Monahan.
Ooh.
Yeah, and yeah, lots of big names coming up. I was trying to figure out if we should do like a new person and a experienced person, or I don't know. I got all kinds of things swirling around in my head. Any ideas you shoot me that that we can add to the swirl will help at least push into, and if there's directions we want to go with this. So anyway, I just love seeing you all. Thank you so much for being here. And we'll see you. Wait, yeah, let's do our screenshot. Martha just reminded me. We'll do like switch to my.
Mark's got his corgi all set up.
All right. Everybody, there's a lot less people now. All right. Hello. All right, you guys have a great day, and we'll chat with you on
too.
Thursday.
Thanks.
Hi.
Bye.
Bye.